Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to Top 5 Metal Albums of 1985. What a year for music it was. 80s sound, style, all of that in absolute full swing. The metal sound had been fully embraced, and so many great albums were getting released, including genre-defining, career reinvention, catalog enhancing, reputation securing, and then tons of albums ran under the radar. But all in all, so many great albums came out. So join me now as I run through the top 5 metal albums of 1985. And we're going to get into it here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with the top 5 metal albums of 1985. Now, on a little side note, I did do a top 5 rock albums of 1985. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. But right now, we are going to focus on metal albums. All right, so kicking things off, coming in at number 5, Dio, Sacred Heart, their third studio album. This was the last to feature Vivian Campbell on guitar as he was fired midway through the tour. Unfortunately, though, not part of the band, but he still landed on his feet because he would go on to play with Whitesnake and then currently with Def Leppard today. So while this may have been the last of the original lineup for Dio, lots and lots of great material still on here. What I found interesting was that the opening track has a faux live sound to it where they added live audience sound to the studio track. So King of Rock and Roll kicks this off. Why you'd start a studio album sounding like a live album, I'll never know. But after that, with the title track Sacred Heart, this thing kicks off in traditional Dio sounding, fist pumping style, and it is, you're off to the races from that point forward. It is so good. The two singles that were released off of this album, Rock and Roll Children and Hungry for Heaven, are some of the best songs that he did throughout this time and era. While it was a little more commercial, that was certainly the era for 1985. But there's other great deep cuts on this album, Another Lie and Just Another Day. Both of those songs equally as good as anything that came off of the album. I think this album as a whole shows how strong, that things were for the band at that time. There's not a bad track on here, of course, save for that faux live sound. The track itself, Rock and Roll Children, Rock and Roll, King of Rock and Roll, was a great song. I just never liked that live sound that came with it. But all in all, it is a great album. I think if they had just put that song at the end or somewhere else, mixed it in the sequence, this album would have done even better, would have been even bigger. But for me, a studio album's got to kick off with studio sounds. But like I said, a great album nonetheless. All right, so coming in at number 4, we've got Accept, Metal Heart, 6th studio album and follow-up to their breakthrough album, Balls to the Wall from 1983. Jorg Fischer, who is their guitar player on I'm a Rebel in 1980 and Breaker in 1981, returns to this album because in between that, Herman Frank had come into the band. And also they finally record with producer Dieter Dierks, who of course is known for working with the Scorpions. So I think it's the combination of both of those things there and the fact that they decided to go in a more commercial direction to try to break the band in the United States, that this album is as good as it is. And while it may not be the big album everyone talks about, Balls to the Wall, personally, I think this album is absolutely top-notch. It's my favorite album from the band. Maybe it is the more radio-friendly sounds that are on here, but it is just written perfectly. It is produced perfectly. Every bit about this album sounds really good to my ears. The 3 songs that were released, in particular, Midnight Mover, which was the video, at least here in the United States, got a good amount of play. This title track, Metal Heart, which opens the album, is a standout track. I don't think that was released in the US, nor was the other song, Screaming for a Love Bite, but all of those absolutely outstanding songs. And all in all, I think that what they did, what they set out to do, it did that for the band. It continued them on. Instead of just sort of falling out off after one great album, it held them on. It didn't break them any bigger, unfortunately, but this album, nonetheless, I think is a great album, which is why it's coming in at number 4. Okay, coming in at number 3, Armored Saint, Delirious Nomad, second studio album produced by Max Norman, who had just got done working with Ozzy Osbourne. He would go on to work with Megadeth. This one was recorded as a 4-piece, though, as guitar player Phil Sandoval had left midway through the writing and recording of the album. He does play on a couple tracks, I think, but all in all, the album is a 4-piece. And I think perhaps by them closing the ranks, recording as a 4-piece, it tightened things up and it makes for a very solid sounding album all the way through on it. This one here, absolute mystery as to why not only this album, but really the band as a whole, why did Armored Saint never break through to be one of the big 80s bands? John Bush in particular, absolutely phenomenal vocals. Of course, we know he'd go on to front Anthrax and get given some of the due that he deserves, but it really never brought the light to his name or the band that I think they should have had for how great they were. Opening track, Long Before I Die, on here is very strong opener on here. It's everything you want to hear from the band, from those soaring John Bush vocals and the pummeling guitars by Dave Pritchard on here. And the rest of the album just keeps on going. It just delivers, hit after hit after hit. Solid sound. This thing here, you don't need to skip any tracks that are on it. Other great tracks on here worth checking out: Nervous Man, Over the Edge, Conqueror. All in all, great stuff. For some reason, you've never checked out this album because this is a bit of an under the radar album, even in the own Armored Saints catalog. Check this out. I think it is a great album. All right, here's an album that doesn't get enough love, though I know people who absolutely love this album the way that I do. So coming in at number 2, we've got Sabotage, Power of the Night, second studio album produced by Max Norman, who we were just talking about with Armored Saint. As I said, he had also worked with Ozzy and would go on to produce Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction and really kind of get recognition at that point. But he was doing a lot of great stuff before that, like this album. It's the last album to feature original bassist Keith Collins. Big leap forward for this album in terms of the sound and style for the band, moving on from Sirens in '83. And while this album here didn't really break down any doors, it did foreshadow where they were going. I think this was a reputation securing album as a second album, and it's, like I said, would let people know where they were going. Unfortunately, though, next album, Fight for the Rock in 1986, was a step back because they tried to go commercial, though they righted the ship for Hall of the Mountain King in '87, which is more in line with this here. But for me, at least, this album was the last great sort of band album before they got into that forward trajectory that would become the Trans-Siberian Orchestra beast that we know of them today, where they were mixing classical and metal music. This is just good fist-pumping metal music. We've got amazing vocals from John Oliva and his brother on guitar, Chris Oliva, in absolute peak form. Both of those guys. This album for me has always stood head and shoulders above everything else that the band has done. Killer standout tracks like the title track, Power of the Night, second song, Unusual, the Necrophilia, Hand for Love, or Head for Love. So many good tracks on this one, but really you could pick anything off this album, give it a listen, and it's going to tell you what you need to know about this great album. But, no agenda here other than just absolutely fist-pumping metal sounding song, but everything great on here, which at least for me is why it's coming in at number 2. All right, the number 1 metal album of 1985 goes to Anthrax, Spreading the Disease, 1985. Second studio album was the first to feature Joey Belladonna on vocals and the first to feature new bassist Frank Bello. So kind of a changing of the guards, a reinventing album. It's produced by Carl Kennedy, however he pronounces his name. He was the drummer for the Rods, and he did a lot of production with metal bands back in the day. It was also the band's major label debut on Island Records, and a huge leap forward both in terms of sound and style from Fistful of Metal in 1984. But it's got all the hallmarks of everything that we love about Anthrax and are gonna love even more going forward on Among the Living. The follow-up in 87 that really broke the band, but this was the one that opened the doors for them. And it's got standout tracks like AIR, Lone Justice, and Madhouse, which was the single, and a music video was made for, but MTV didn't play it all that much. They felt as though it was making fun of people with mental issues, and so unfortunately not a lot of widespread airplay. I think had it gotten that widespread airplay, this album might have been getting talked about the way that we talk about Among the Living. This album, though, a solid step forward for the band. It's just got really good, songs on it, the sound on it, the production on it, everything aligned. And it was where the band should be and where they were going to be going. But all in all, I think this album stands up today, which is why, for me at least, is the #1 metal album of 1985. So there you guys go. I hope you enjoyed the run through of these 5 albums. But hey, what is your favorite metal album of 1985? Is it one of the ones that I selected, or is it another one out there that you want to announce and mention in the comments? But weigh in, let me know, and we'll have a great conversation on it. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.